Welcome to the Save Network podcast. I'm Jim Sparks. I'm here with Megan Villalpando.
Hey guys.
Abraham Guevara.
How's it going?
And in today's episode, we have everyone's favorite Captain AJ Zimmerman from the Central Territory. Hello, AJ Zimmerman.
What's up? Hello, Zimmerman.
Yes, you are everyone's favorite Captain AJ.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you're the only one, but still a favorite. AJ is currently stationed in the Territorial Youth Department in the Central Territory and was previously stationed at the Kroc Center in Chicago. Was that your first appointment?
No, my first appointment was in East St. Louis.
Oh, fancy. Mm-hmm. He has a laugh that is contagious and is just an all-around good dude. And we love AJ. But before we get into the interview with him, Megan, what do we have for youth culture?
Yeah, so I have an article for you guys. This article I came across recently, and it's called "What is the Best Sneaker According to Gen Z?" So remember, Gen Z is ages 8 to 23. So does anyone have any guesses what sneaker is like Gen Z's favorite sneaker? Any guesses?
Nike Air Force One.
Yeah, right.
Any other guesses?
Probably easy.
I said easy.
Yeah.
Easy. Jim was right, actually. It is the Air Force One. I was shocked myself.
That's right, man.
I know. I don't know how Jim knew that. I guess he's super on top of youth culture.
Nike Air Force One, baby.
It's your boys
Some
buy that
others
one?
got...
So did your boys ask for that one, Jim?
No, they don't care about shoes.
Oh.
So.
There were some others that got some honorable mentions. You may or may not have heard of these. The Nike Off-White Off-Court 3.0 sneakers. These retail for a mere $605.
Oh my gosh.
The women's New Balance 624 sneakers. They're just like those white New Balances with like the navy blue outline in the N and the B. They retail for $70.
The hipsters really grabbed onto that. The Highland Park people.
This is a helpful list, Megan, for my Christmas shopping list.
Another top pick was a classic, the Converse Chuck Taylor high tops. Not surprised those are on there. Another one is the Nike Air Jordan 1 Mid SE. I'm not super familiar with this. When I saw the picture, I recognized it. You guys might be more familiar than me. And then the Adidas Original Superstar. And I actually used to have a pair of these back in the day. They're just the white sneaker with the 3 stripes in a color. I think I had like some baby blue ones or something.
With the heavy
So those were the ones that got, yes. So those got an honorable mention. So I guess when I was going through this article, some of the responses, they surprised me, but some were also popular when I was a kid as well and have just made a comeback. I hope it's because, you know, they're super awesome. But I'm wondering...
I'm sure of that.
I only know Air Force One from that Nelly song.
That's right.
That's all I remember.
So, in looking at this list, is there a shoe or some pair of shoes that when you were growing up that were like super cool that you just either had to have, or maybe you had them, or you wish you had them, or what was like your favorite shoe when you were in that Gen Z age range, age 8 to 23?
Well, growing up, everyone had Vans for us. Like that was your go-to shoe. It was a Southern California shoe specifically. In fact, the Vans shoe store that I bought from was like one of the original ones. And so what I paid $65 for today for a pair of Vans for one of my kids, we paid $25 for the exact same shoe. There's zero difference. But okay, so it was Jordans, to answer your question. It was Jordans. Everyone wanted a Jordan, but I I think it was Jordan's. It was Jordan's might have been one of the first ones that got over the $100 barrier, and that was like unreal. Like to get $100 pair of shoes growing up was insane. And but then other manufacturers like Reebok tried to, with the Reebok pumps came out. Those were huge. Those were a big hit. But then
Those shoes made you jump high.
they allegedly did. And so but I could tell you, I borrowed a pair and I never jumped higher. But I was at a basketball camp, and they were giving away a pair of LA Gear catapults. Now, the LA Gear catapults were supposed to revolutionize the industry. They were equipped with a reactionary spring in the heel that was to actually make you jump higher. And they were like $125. They were ridiculously high. And so at this basketball camp, they did a raffle. Where you pick a name. I don't know if that's a raffle, but they pick names. And I got a free pair of LA Gear catapults. And the NBA player who was the guest was Olden Polynice. And he was like a journeyman center that really no one knew. So he gave me my pair of catapults. And we couldn't believe that I was getting over $100 pair of shoes. Like, that was unreal. The most expensive shoe at that point that I had ever had was $35. So it was a really, really big deal. So fast forward to 15 years ago, I was in a golf tournament, and lo and behold, Olden Polynice was in the foursome right in front of me with Ray Lewis, the football player, right? And so I'm like, I have to introduce myself to Olden Polynice. And so I go, hey, I was in a basketball camp and you gave me a free pair of shoes. And he was like, oh man, that's so exciting. I go, you made me the most popular kid in school because I was the only one that had LA Gear catapults. And he was like, oh, that's awesome. I go, but I have an issue. 2 weeks later, everyone realized I was still wearing LA Gears. And turns out the LA Gears were never cool. And I just got made fun of the entire time for wearing LA Gears, which he too thought was very funny. But most expensive pair of shoe I ever owned was the LA Gear catapults. They turned out to be a source of bullying for me, unfortunately. But no, it was the Jordans. The standard was Vans. But Jordans were the shoe to get.
So to go off of Megan's question, I grew up in Fresno, so we all wanted LA Gears. The light up ones, man, the LA lights. That's what everybody wanted, and it
On
was
purpose?
the 90s. Yes, very much on purpose.
Wow.
If you were wearing those in school, especially at church, because when we had like night church. After we're playing with all the kids outside, you could see them lighting that the shoes lighting up, and it looked really cool and everything. But then people were like, "Don't get them," because in the 90s, everything can get you shot. So apparently, there was this rumor going around about those light up shoes. I don't know if it was true. I never heard a news story about it. It was just kind of like maybe an urban legend. I don't know.
Well, you just summed up the 90s. It was,
Yeah,
don't do it because you're going to get shot.
Yeah, don't wear that color.
If a car doesn't have their lights on at night and it's in the intersection, don't flash your lights at them because you're going to get shot. It's like,
I still don't do that today.
It was the default for every mom, I think. Don't do that. You're going to get shot.
Yeah.
Maybe they were going to be the ones that were going to shoot us.
Yeah.
We considered that. AJ, what was the shoe for you?
Well, see, I'm like terrible at this. I didn't really care about shoes very much. And like, I used to always outgrow my shoes. So pretty much I was lazy. I didn't like to tie my shoes. So anything that didn't have laces, I was fine with.
That's where the slip-on Vans were.
That's right.
Where they came in.
I fell in love with flip-flops right around 18, like 17, 18 years old. It just became flip-flops. And so it's pretty much been that way ever since.
Well,
I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, of course, and the really popular shoe growing up was the Doc Martens. Everyone
yeah.
loved the Doc Martens, whether it was the sandal Doc Marten or the boots. I could not afford Doc Martens growing up, so I had the Skechers, chunky Skechers at one point. And then I would say my favorite shoe, though, that I actually own that I would just wear all the time, and again, being from the Pacific Northwest, I don't know why I was so into this shoe, because it was white, was the Jack Purcells. Those were like my favorite shoe. I would wear those all the time. And again, because they're white and the weather, they were always getting trashed. So I went through a lot of pairs of Jack Purcells.
I think the all white Jack Purcell and Doc Marten was a lot of girls combo in the late 90s, early 2000s.
It was like the Uggs of the 90s.
Yes, it was like they're like, oh, what would go well as a alternative to my Docs? I'm gonna go with the white Jack Purcells. Yep, strong. Those were pretty strong.
Yep. So you could check out the article. We'll link it in the show notes. So yeah, make sure you check it out and let us know what your favorite shoe was back in the day when you were a kid.
It should be also noted that our former colleague and former Central person, David Widoff, probably owns 12 Air Force Ones. He loves the Air Force.
We'll be posting his address in the show notes.
Yeah. They're all different colors.
His collection.
He's like, hey guys, I got the June bug one. I was like, June bug. Yep. Remember those green? Those are fancy, but yep, Air Force Ones are around to say. I think one of the other benefits of the Air Force Ones is they do make you a little bit taller because they have a pretty thick sole. So for those that are trying to get on the roller coasters at Disneyland that are just there, go get those Air Force Ones. Or those Skechers boots that Megan was wearing.
There are pictures out there.
That's pretty funny. Excellent. I love talking shoes. Yeah, that made me a little happy today. Thank you for that. This podcast is talking about preaching fails or teaching fails. Those moments where either you think you've got it going on and it's going well, and then you say something wrong, or you just bomb straight from the beginning and it just doesn't go well, or something might happen in the middle of that. I did ask our social media audience, and a lot of them came back with stories that probably can't share in full, but strangely some nudity involved or underwear and stuff. I'm not really entirely sure what's going on with
this
people.
is a G-rated podcast.
I know. And actually quite a bit of cussing on accident, whether they've combined two words or something has happened. One of our former bosses, I'll tell this story because I think it's funny, is that it was Easter service, and it was packed because it's Easter and people go to church twice a year. And then he had, so he did the whole write your sins on paper and then put them in and they'll be gone and stuff like that. Well, he had them write it on flash paper, and they didn't know that they were writing on flash paper. And so he put it in and lit it up and went, poof. And a guy in the front row yelled an expletive because it was so surprising on Easter morning. And then everyone lost it and was laughing and derailed the entire sermon altogether. So, so those are them. Some crashing things happening, like from different sets. One of my favorite online videos is when the drummer in a worship band, Abraham, I think you sent me that one, where they're drumming and then the set falls on the drummer's head. Always golden, but
big cross just.
Oh yeah, that's right. The cross came in, smacked him on the head. But
he was living in sin.
He was, but we brought in AJ not because he's an expert failure, but because I just started to think about that segment. I'm like, wait, we're bringing him in because we're talking about failures, but because AJ's willing to talk about this kind of stuff and willing to kind of laugh and enjoy life a little bit more. Because some people, I've watched people, this happens at camp, particularly when someone's giving like their devotions for the first time and something doesn't go well, they just walk off the stage and they don't want to ever talk about it. And it's rough altogether. But AJ, have you failed while preaching and teaching? Have you had one of these moments?
Yes, I have had many moments. I don't even know which one to pick from. It's funny that when you were talking about the swear word one, I wasn't going to share this, but I had one of those moments where I apparently accidentally swore. I don't think I did, but they said that I did. Just because apparently I have an accent. I didn't know I did, but I do. And I was preaching, and I won't even say it on the podcast because it's a G-rated, but I have a hard time saying Arnold's last name. So the strong guy, Arnold, how do you say his name?
Schwarzenegger?
Yeah, so I say sports, and then... So just imagine me up there preaching, and I said his name, and then like one person, I remember it was like the person that's doing the PowerPoint, he like fell out of his chair laughing, and I had no idea like why. I was just like, I don't know why you're doing this, but so I just kept powering through. But yeah, but that was one a swear word one. But the one I was thinking of sharing, like one of my epic fails, and I apologize if I start laughing, but there's one time when I was preaching a very serious sermon. I'm like preaching, and it's a very heavy topic. And in order for you to understand a little bit context of the story, you have to understand like my preaching style. So some people are like manuscript, they like read their sermon. I am not one of those people. So I have to like memorize my sermon. And oftentimes I also have like ADD. So I can't look at people. So if I look at people while I'm preaching, like I start to notice things and I like laugh and stuff. So I always look over their heads or look towards the back. And so this one time I'm preaching this sermon, everything is pretty much going normal. It's a very heavy topic. We get to the end of the sermon, and I'm doing like the altar call. And apparently the whole time, it's this lady is in a front seat. She's a bigger lady. She's in the front seat. She's wearing a skirt. And she is like snoring so loud. Like she has a skirt on. Her legs are like spread apart. Oh, no. Her head is like back. And she's like snoring super loud. Now, mind you, like I'm not paying her any attention because I'm looking at the back. And so people start to get up and go to the altar. So I start kind of looking to see who's going to the altar. And I like kind of glance over and I see her and I see the mother of the church. This lady's like 90 years old. She like gets up and she never goes to the altar. So I'm like shocked. You know, she like gets up and she like holds her hand back and like slaps her in the back of her head. And the lady like wakes up and just starts shaking and startling. So she was like snoring. It was like, and she just started doing this like shaking thing. And so like I put my head down because it's a serious time. Like people are at the altar and they're like crying and everything. And so I just put my head down and I'm just like this. And my shoulders are like bouncing up and down. And so the other officer noticed that like I'm in distress, like I need help and like I am not going to be able to land the plane. And so he like gets up and he like puts his hand on my shoulder. You know him, Jim. His name's Major Mark, short guy. And he like puts his hand on my shoulder and he like has to take over the whole service because I am like dying to the point where I'm like crying at this point. And so so I finally get myself together and I like sneak off and like sit down and he finishes the sermon. So we have a tradition at the Croc Center where we go to the back and we like greet people. And, you know, people were like, you know what? You were just so moved by the Spirit. You were like crying and all this stuff. And I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like the worst.
That's awesome. Oh, man. I wish I could have seen that. Oh, that's so good. What about the rest of you? Do you guys have a story? It's gonna be, you can't really top that one, so we could agree to not try to top
No,
that one.
I
But
cannot. I
but
cannot top that one. I do have a story. Um, and I got one of those preaching slots, like those camp ones, where they ask you to come over and kind of like be a guest preacher. The only problem is, being Hispanic, we have like Hispanic family. We speak English and Spanish, so you never know like if the service is going to be in Spanish or in English. My Spanish is fine. It gets the job done, enough to survive. It should be better. My mom's not very proud of that, but they asked me to preach in Spanish, and I was looking at my wife and kind of like very worried, and I was looking at my cousin who was kind of putting the whole thing together, and I was like, "Hey, is there any way I could do English?" He's all like, "It's better if you just do Spanish." I'm like, "All right." All my notes are in English. Everything's in English. So when that happens, my brain has to kind of like do a little bit of a switch, some like processing. Like it has to run through a translator in my brain and then out of my mouth. And that translator that day was not working quick enough. And so I was, I think, on my first point and in Spanish, and I started just getting these glances, just looking at everybody, and I was just like, "Dang it, this isn't working, man." The eyes, people were just kind of like having this look, where they kind of feel sorry for you. And then I look over to the side, and I see my cousin. He's all like, "Just do English," and they send up. I switched to English, and they send up a translator. I'm like, "Why didn't we just do this from the beginning?" But mid sermon, I had to switch from. I had to kind of bail out, hit the eject button. So yeah.
it's funny. Megan, you got a story?
I don't know about like a preaching teaching story, but I will say we were talking about cuss words earlier. I was in a meeting with Major Roy Wild a few years ago, and we were talking about something serious, and I was trying to say the word focus, and I like squished my words together, and I just dropped an F-bomb right in front of him, like in a meeting. And I just couldn't recover from that point. The meeting just ended because I was so embarrassed. I was like, I can't. So that was a fail.
Yeah.
Speaking of like words, when you also going back to being Hispanic, there's a lot of accents. My mom has a very heavy accent, and a lot of like my family has very heavy accents. And they go on stage and they'll like say something in English, and many times the words don't sound like the way you think they sound. Like the word breath sometimes doesn't come out sounding like breath, or the word beach doesn't sound like beach. And so, yeah, that happens a lot. And my sister and I have had many moments where we're just dying listening to like a family member on stage and stuff. So I won't tell you the exact situations because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But yeah,
We'll ask Betsy.
Yeah.
yeah.
That's very funny. I've had a few times, well, a lot of times where I bombed somewhere, and but actually AJ at CBLI, I don't know if you've ever run into this, but I had to speak like 5 or 6 times because CBLI they don't just bring you for like a little bit. They're going to work you the entire time.
The money's worth, man.
They certainly did, and but I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's because we had a newborn, like Ethan was brand new, and we were there, and I was probably nervous as well. But halfway through one of the sermons, I looked down and like my notes just turned upside down completely, and I froze. And I don't know how long I froze. I don't know how long I didn't say anything. I was hoping that they just thought I got choked up over talking about the Samson, because you know how emotional that story is. And but I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what I'm going to say. And like I said, it could have been like 8 seconds, but it could have been a minute. I still to this day don't know. And I looked up and everyone is just giving me this look. And the only thing I could think of was like, I'm sorry, I was buffering. And then I just moved on, but I couldn't be coherent for the rest of the sermon. I couldn't figure it out. And that one was a really bad one. And so when I finished, this older gentleman came up to me in the back. He goes, well, you can't win them all, right? I was like, yes, you are right. Thank you for your honesty. But yeah, I stopped in the middle of one sermon in Hawaii. I was preaching at whatchamacallit, Waianae, and it's a tent and in a park, and people were going back and forth. And AJ, it would have been your nightmare because there was things going all over the place. And a chicken ran right through the tent, and I at that point I could feel myself veering off course, and then I'm talking, and a guy rolls up with a bunch of McDonald's bags, and he just starts passing them out to people in the tent, and then passing them out to people outside the tent. And then at that point, I was rattled, and I clearly wasn't prepared enough to be able to power through it. And so I said, "All right, let's just pray." And so I just prayed about 10 minutes into it, and I was like, "We're done. I got nothing." But I had never seen someone pass out McDonald's. That one, I was not prepared for that at all. AJ, how do you respond when you've messed up, or like you could tell that it's not going well?
Well, I probably would say like you just gotta own it. You know, like sometimes things don't go well, and it's fine. It depends. Well, I guess it depends on who your crowd is. So I feel like sometimes maybe that's a sign for you to pivot or to even ask clarifying questions like, are you guys getting it? Like, you know, is it, you know, you know, is this working type thing? But is this mic on? But yeah, I think most of the time. Amen? Yeah, can I get an amen? But I think a lot of times, I just, you know, you just own it. When you mess up, you make a mistake, just, you know, hey, I messed up, and then kind of keep going. That's typically what I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are willing to move on, and people know that mistakes happen. And I think you're right when they don't own up to it. There's an example of this. It was at a youth councils a long time ago, and this guy was talking about youth culture and the music that we listen to and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And he had done a bunch of interviews. It must have been for some research project of different artists. And but he was talking about Nelly Furtado, but he switched the Nellies to he accidentally was talking about the other Nelly. And so the youth group from Las Vegas called him out from like the audience, like in the third row, and like, "You're talking about the wrong Nelly. You don't know what you're talking about, right?" And because he had just gone on this long tangent about how he knows all these people and knows this culture through and through, and then he makes a mistake. Now that's an honest mistake, right? But he swung back and was like, "No, you don't know how many famous people I know and interviewed and stuff like that. And I know my people, and it was just a mistake. All he had to do was like, oh, yes, I'm sorry. I screwed up. And I was actually talking about the other one." And it would have been fine and stuff. The rest of the sermon, he was just like obliterated, absolutely obliterated. And he just melted up on stage. And yeah, I do think just owning it is a thing. You can laugh at yourself. It's okay to laugh, and like mistakes happen, especially when you combine those words. You see a lot of those videos where you just like, you just laugh at yourself. The thing that I always tell, particularly young people when they're like getting up to do a sermon or devotions, is that the audience is rooting for you. This isn't showtime at the Apollo. They're not ready to send you out, right? They're rooting for you. And so if you mess up, they're still rooting for you, and they may laugh and you may laugh later. But they're rooting for you. But yeah, that's good advice. As I can think back, there's been a couple times where I've tried to force an issue, and it doesn't go well. I think that's good advice. Just own it and relax. Ride the wave and be part of the story.
Just kind of segue into this next question. So I have a really bad tendency to kind of get the giggles when I see somebody fall. I know that's horrible and it's really mean. But if I see somebody fall, my natural reaction is like, I just can't control myself. I just start laughing and then I feel guilty. The guilt sets in and I'm like, oh my gosh, are you okay? But when somebody falls, it is a little bit of an inappropriate time to be laughing. I'm working on it. I'm 35 years old, but I'm working on that still. AJ, when was the last time you got the giggles in a place where you shouldn't have? I know you shared a story before while you were preaching. Is there another time where you maybe got the giggles when you shouldn't have?
Yeah, I tend to get the giggles when I shouldn't have, like literally while I'm preaching. I don't know why this always happens to me, but it does. There was this one time where this was one time where I was preaching a sermon and I was talking about, okay, one thing I have learned is as a pastor, I can't do rhetorical questions because like when people answer a rhetorical question, it just makes me laugh so hard. So I can't not laugh. So there was this one time where I was preaching this sermon and I was talking about John the Baptist. And my whole point was, what was John the Baptist's last name? And, it was like the Baptist. And it was like, what you do kind of defines who you are. And so I asked a rhetorical question. So like, if we put that in that context, based off what you do, what would be your last name? And so this really older guy, he like raises his hand. And like at this moment, it's like that little like angel and devil situation on my shoulder. I'm like the devil is like, answer him. The angel's like, don't do it. It's going to throw you off. And so then I just like called on him. And like, he's just a really older guy. And he's like leaning back in his chair and he doesn't have many teeth. And he like raises his hand and he's just like, yes, they call me the Chicken Man because I eat lots of chicken. And I lost it. Like, I was like doubled over laughing. And I was trying to say something like, I was trying to like bring it around and say like, oh, you eat a lot of chicken. That's what I couldn't. I just like literally like bent over and was crying. And so like the congregation is laughing. I'm laughing. And like, I don't even remember if I even finished that sermon because I was like, I was just dying. So like typically if someone answers my rhetorical question, no matter what it is, I laugh. Like, I just start giggling and I can't stop.
That's really good to know. Just for future's sake, when I am sitting at the seat teaching AJ, he asks a question like, I got an answer.
If you ask any
that's why I try not to do
get
it.
an answer.
Abe, Jim, do you guys have any time where you've got the giggles when you shouldn't have?
Yes. 2 funerals.
Oh no!
And they were funny. They were like funny things there, but for some reason they made me like, it was something where like everyone kind of laughed, but for some reason it made me laugh even more and I couldn't stop. But there was one time at camp, I was a visitor at a camp, and it was a campfire, and it was like an emotional one of those like light your stick on fire campfires, right? And so it was this counselor, and I saw this counselor like prepping before. They were pacing before because they were doing their sermon devotional, which I think it was like their first time. And so I'm sitting in kind of near the back in the middle of a bunch of kids. And it gets to an emotional part of that. And like the mood is ideal, right? And this no more than 8-year-old little girl right in front of me ripped off one of the largest farts I've ever heard, ever. And it just bounced right off the wood bench. And it went through that entire amphitheater like a shockwave. And she was right in front of me. And the look, because look, that's happened before, and I could keep a straight face through a fart, right? But the look combo that with the look on the poor girl who's doing the devotions, like for her first time, of like horror. I lost it. I was laughing so hard. I could not contain myself. There was zero. I had to get up and leave. And the funniest part to me, I think what made it even worse, is the little girl in front of me, who I know for 100% did it. All right. There was zero mistake. Didn't even budge. There wasn't even an ounce of embarrassment. It was as if it was not even happened. And I could not stop laughing. Well, the problem is I was the guest. And so they were going to be bringing me up after, and they were looking for me. And then it made it look like I wasn't even at the campfire because I had bounced. I could not stop laughing. It was that girl, hero. She was a hero that day. It made me laugh. I do have a friend that got the giggles, and his dad was the Corps officer. His brother and him were screwing around, and they both got the giggles. And his dad, from the podium, brought them up on stage in the middle of the sermon and had them sit on either side of the stage for getting the giggles. So he's like, we never got the giggles after that. But can you imagine? You're just laughing your head off, and then now you got to stand at everyone.
Mine tend to happen. I can't remember the specific story. I do know there was a couple times when I was a kid with my sister and me in church where my sister would just try to get me to laugh to get in trouble because we're the pastor's kids, and so we tend to get in trouble the most. Um, at a wedding, my cousin and I got him laughing at a wedding. But I think more recently, I can't remember the situation, but this happens a couple times with my wife. My wife and I will be sitting in a service at church, and it's like the two guys off of the Muppets, the two critics, the two old guys. That's like sometimes like if there's something happening on stage, my wife and I will transform into those two guys, and we'll just go back and forth about things that we're seeing on stage and bantering. And a couple times it's gone out of control where we get people looking back at us, at this married couple being louder than the kids. So
Is that Waldorf and Statler? Is that right?
yes, yeah.
Nice. I'm on fire with my trivia today. All right, Abraham.
Uh, AJ, so you do youth programming. Is there has there ever been a moment where something went south on you with youth programming, something that you had planned out, um, and in all your years of helping out the youth, I'm sure there are plenty of moments like that. But is there anything in particular that just went terribly south?
Um, yeah, this is like one of those things where I have like a million stories too. Like I have one to throw up that was like not the greatest. Yeah, it's always involved like food. Like you can't for some reason like me in programming, I like to like do like fear factor or daring things, whatever, and it's always like people throwing up and stuff like that. But particularly, I remember this one time where we went camping, and I just want to let you know I'm from Detroit. We don't, and I'm black, and we don't camp at all. And so I had a ranger group, and I had to take them out camping, and I like literally did not know what I was doing, and I don't know why the Salvation Army even allowed me to like me and another leader to take these kids out because I had no idea what I was doing. Like somebody could have literally died. And so we were cooking, and we were cooking hot dogs and pork and beans, and I didn't. I saw online that you can put the can in a fire and then and then it'll cook itself, whatever. So I'm thinking to myself like, oh, that's great, that's awesome, like low maintenance, no issue. But I couldn't remember if I had to take the lid off or if I had to like keep it on. So I was like, you know what I'll do? I'll put one can with the lid on and one can I'll take the lid off. So we put it in the fire and we're cooking these hot dogs. And all of a sudden, like the beans that where the can was on it, it exploded. Like it, it was like a bomb, like a literal bomb. And beans, like hot beans went everywhere.
Oh.
Like we're like diving. We don't know what's going on. I'm having like PTSD because I'm from Detroit. I thought I heard a gunshot, and so I'm like diving and like pushing kids out the way. And then like afterwards, we figured out what it was, and we're like laughing, and then all of a sudden, like probably like 3 minutes later, the lid falls to the ground. It's like ting 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 ting. It's like, oh, you can't make these things up. So I learned that day that you have to take the lid off of the beans if you want to cook it in the fire.
That's pretty funny.
That's awesome.
Megan, were you? I think you may have been with me when we were at Intermountain. There was youth councils, and they were doing like a Fear Factor type game, where a girl had to put her head in a liquid of some sort, and then get like, it was like a ho-ho or something like that, and like Bob for Apple type thing, and she did, and she popped her head up, and this was on stage in front of all of youth councils, and it was probably within the first 20 minutes of youth council starting, and she popped her head up, and then also just got really big eyes, and I'm standing on the other end of the table, and I'm looking at her, and all of a sudden she goes and she's gasping, and she's choking, and an officer recognized it right away, ran up on stage and gave her the Heimlich, and shot it right out. She got the Heimlich like in the first like 15 minutes of youth councils.
I don't think I was there, but I wish I had been there.
Oh, okay. That was incredible. And actually, in that same youth councils, I believe that was the hardest that Fulton and I had ever laughed, because they had gotten a mechanical bull, but they didn't get the mechanical bull that is mechanical. They got the one where you have 4 people and they're yanking on ropes on each corner, right? And so they just wherever you're yanking on it, that's where the ball's going to go, right? Well, this youth worker who I've never seen before, and I never saw after. And so I'm not sure what happened to her, but she was very confident and was like, I'll get on there and I'll last longer than all of you guys, right? So they yank on the count of 2 instead of 3. And so she wasn't ready. And so her face goes shooting forward and just absolutely slams the front of the ball. Well, the kids aren't paying attention because they're just yanking on these strings, and 5-6 repeated headshots to the ball, and she fell off. She's got blood, and I couldn't stop giggling because the whiplashes were like violent. And so we checked to see if she was okay. She goes, I'm fine, but she's got blood coming out, right? And so we couldn't find her. A little bit later, I was a little concerned about concussions, right? And she was a concussion protocol as a youth worker. And we go outside, and she's sitting on the rocks, like against the building in the dirt, and just like kind of low moaning it out. I'm like, are you okay? And she goes, I think I really hurt my face. You should have saw the poor kids. They were screaming and laughing. They didn't have any clue that they were just killing their youth worker, absolutely killing it. So yeah, that didn't go so well. But AJ, what's the best preaching advice that you've ever been given?
I think it would just be yourself. And also, if it's boring to you, it's going to be boring to them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely important.
And then what advice do you give to young people when they're learning how to do like devotions and teach and start doing these type of things?
Yeah, I mean, I would probably say the same thing to them. It's like one, it's preaching and like standing up in front of people can be so nerve-wracking. So like you definitely have to practice. It's like not one of those things where you can just be like, oh, I can wing it. Like you have to practice. Right. I've even done things where like random things where like before an event start, I like get up on the stage just so I can feel comfortable, like find your space, your spot. But basically I would just say like, don't wing it. Practice. And also, you know, if you make a mistake, it happens to everyone. Just kind of power through it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's good advice. Preparation is key to victory, for sure. AJ, we do give our guests a time just to give a direct message address our listeners directly. Do you have anything additional you would like to share?
Yeah, I guess I would just say I know that so these are youth and they are preparing for ministry or preaching or teaching and sharing their faith. And I would just say do it with confidence. Don't go up there and share what you know. It's a difference between sharing what you heard versus sharing what you know, or sharing what you learn versus sharing what you know. I think it's very powerful to hear about how God is moving and what God has done with you and for you, and how you can kind of share that with somebody else. It gives you a different feel versus someone who is sharing something that they heard or sharing something out of obligation. So I don't like that word obligation. Don't share out of obligation. Don't preach out of obligation. Don't stand up in front of people out of obligation. Do it because the God has done something for you and you want to share it with somebody else.
Very, very good words. Captain AJ, we appreciate you and think you're pretty awesome. Thank you for being here. If you're listening and have questions, thoughts on the episode, or just a funny story, please reach out to us. We want to hear from you. You can send us a message on social media at Sade Network or email us at sadeconnect@gmail.com. Anything we've talked about in this episode will be linked in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to the Sade Network podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube for updates on new episodes. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Wiedersehen.